Hi, I'm Kevin Finch, director of Wes Bound, the Genius of Wes Montgomery. You may know many Montgomery names, of course Wes the most, but Monk, the great bass player, who was the first to play the Fender electric bass guitar, Buddy, the other brother, who was an exceptional pianist and vibraphone player, toured with Miles Davis, you might have heard of him. Well, how about Miko Montgomery? Miko Montgomery toured for years and played in Vegas. He was a longtime Las Vegas musician, and he is the nephew of Wes Montgomery, has some great stories, including observations about Wes when Miko was a little guy, meeting his uncle and getting this impression of this great musician showing up at his sister's doorstep. So check that one out.
My most vivid memory of your father, it happened on Graceland. He came by one night to see my mom. Unexpected, right? And there's a knock at the door. She opens the door, and I'm not exaggerating, dude. There was like this moonlight behind him. And you see this outline, and before you even knew who he was, you just knew somebody special was there, man. He walked in, and I remember looking up, and it was like Santa Claus. He just had this vibe, man. And I just kept looking at him, and he sat with my mom, and they were talking. And I remember drawing pictures of him because it was just, it made such an impact on me. And before he left, I laid one of those pictures on him, and he was just tickled to death, man.
Didn't he laugh?
He laughed, man, because I had captured him. He had on his brim and three-quarter coat, cufflinks, shoes, and all of that. And I had captured all of it. He was like, man, look at this. He just, I'll never forget that. Never forget that. That vibe, man. Wow. He personally inspired me as a musician because when you hear Wes Montgomery, it's either him or somebody trying to sound like him. His style is so distinct. Whereas you listen to a lot of people, particularly today, and it's hard to, everybody kind of sounds alike, but you know that sound. And that's when an artist, I don't care whether you're music or writing or whatever, ideally you need to have your own distinct sound, your own distinct voice, and he had that. So I would say as an artist, that's the thing that really sticks out most about him. I guess some people, though, think of jazz as like anything instrumental. For some people, it's jazz, or anything that's got a saxophone is jazz or whatever. I've seen, you remember Enya? I've seen her in the jazz section. I mean, your father was beyond labels, I think. He just kind of obliterated the labels, and I think some people have a problem with that. Some people want labels, some people need labels, and he was just above that. He was, Wes Montgomery. I remember in a Zappa interview, Zappa was a big fan, and he just said, I wish that there had been less strings, or that they'd been mixed better with it. No, there's a really cool album. I prefer his older stuff. And there's an album he's got called Fusion. And the reason that album is so cool to me is that they were using an orchestra, but the way it was produced, the strings would come in and out and in and out. So you'd be like hearing like a trio sort of a thing, and then the strings would come in, and it was just produced really, really nice. And on that same album, he's got this famous tune called Tune Up, and he does about 4 or 5 versions of it, and every single solo is different. And I love that. He caught flack about how commercial the music was, which it was what people don't realize, particularly for that time, was that he was kind of like the gateway drug to jazz, because people that weren't thinking about jazz suddenly, through hearing maybe A Day in a Life or whatever, going back and rediscovering some things. So it was very important what he did, very important. My favorite Wes Montgomery story, and we were just talking about his laughter and how happy and how up he was. There's this story I heard where cutting a session, and usually if there was going to be an orchestra involved, they would do like the small group first and then, cut the orchestra later. But they were doing everyone at one time for this particular session, right? So everybody's all in the studio, and they do the tune, and he plays this unbelievable solo, you know. And they're coming to the end of the tune, and then someone in the orchestra made a mistake, like really, really bad, to where they were going to have to cut the tune again. And everybody was scared because he had just played this killer solo, and they knew he was going to have to do the tune again. And when they told him why, he cracked up laughing. He said, "That dude over there can't play. He messed my tune up." And then they played the tune again, and he did a totally different solo, but better than the last one. Like, yeah, that's Wes Montgomery, man.
Perfection.
Yeah, man. But so cool about it.
Yeah.
You know, you ever notice, like, when you see him playing, like, on YouTube and stuff, he's like out for a walk or chewing gum. Like, no, ain't struggling at all. It's just unbelievable. He's like, yeah, I'm just throwing down. What about it, you know?
Think about that. Oh, Wes, we're going to have to do it all over again. And this is the days before everything's put together electronically. So we're really going to have to do it all over again. And he does a better solo the second time around. That is so cool. And then also a young guy, little Miko, taking in his uncle, this sort of mythical figure, and right there being moved to make sketches of him, that sort of thing. Great stuff. Thank you, Miko Montgomery. Great voice. I always thought he had such a great voice when we interviewed him. And a pleasure to have him involved in Wes Bound, and now further Wes Bound. Until the next time, thanks for watching.